These are our expert lawyers today who are here to talk to us, answer questions. You're all here because you have questions about how to find the best lawyer, what to expect from your lawyer. And Joanna and Rose are really well suited to answer all of these questions. Let's do a quick introduction. I don't want to go on too long with the introductions, but Joanna, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So I am the founder of our firm here in Barrie, which is called JMS Law. I'm also the principal lawyer in a couple of areas of law that we do here. So family law is one of them, and then of course real estate and wills, and we do some immigration work and criminal work. So we kind of sort of stretch the gamut of a lot of the different areas of law. I'm also a children's lawyer, so I've been representing a lot of children in family matters. I've been doing this now for almost, just over 18 years. So a lot of experience in that realm. And I just created a parenting program to help parents who are going through separation and divorce to help them to find better ways to communicate. And that was sort of like a recent phenomenon. So that's me.
That's amazing. And Rose?
Okay, so I'm Rose Pellar, and I am an associate lawyer with JMS Law. Prior to that, I had my own practice, and I have been practicing family law for over 25 years. And I add to that I am a graduate of the School of Hard Knocks. I have been through divorces, unfortunately, but I've learned a lot. And having that experience has made me more relatable to my family law clients. I also do wills and estates at JMS Law, and I am always grateful for the opportunity to speak to anyone going through divorce, because I know sometimes it's so confusing and overwhelming, and a lot of times you don't get the kind of information you need when you're going through divorce, especially from a lawyer. Most lawyers tend to be very factual and focus on the facts and not really the person who's going through divorce. So I'm happy to be here today to share with you.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think where I want to start today is really at the beginning of a client's journey. And, they're divorcing, everything is very fresh and raw. And hiring a lawyer is probably the last thing they've ever thought about in their entire life. And so now they're at that point where it's time. They know, everybody tells them, well, you better get legal advice. They have no idea what that means. Where do I find a lawyer? Am I Googling it? Is there someone who's going to tell me who's good out there? So there's all these, it's overwhelming, so they get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm booking an initial consultation with someone. Now, what can they expect from an initial consultation?
Rose, I'll turn that to you.
Okay, so the initial consultation is an opportunity for you to get informed about your rights and your obligations. But it's not just that, it's for you to share what has happened during your marriage and what is happening now that you have decided, or the other person has decided for you, that the marriage is at an end. So telling your story is very important. And sometimes the information you may give, you may think it's not relevant, but in a lot of ways it is, because at least the lawyer will get to know exactly what you're feeling. You perhaps have had a marriage, say 10 years, whatever the case may be. And you may say, well, I have been married 10 years and we have 2 children, and he decided to end the marriage. Now, we know a marriage just doesn't end because somebody says they want it to end. It could have been things, events that have led up to this particular point in time. It may have been that you could have been mentally or verbally abused, And it's at that stage where you went no more. Okay. It's important for you to tell the lawyer why you've reached to this stage or what the other person is saying about why the marriage ends. Because only when the lawyer knows all the background to what brought you to this stage can they properly represent you. So during the initial consultation, it's the lawyer's job to dig to the bottom to find out what's going on. And then once or she has reached the stage of knowing what you're going through, the lawyer can then tell you what are the issues that you have to be addressing, whether it's parenting time, primary residence, child support, spousal support, property issues. And it's the lawyer's job to tell you, this is what the law provides. This is what ordinarily would happen. That is not to say that you can't decide outside of the law, because there may be an instance, for instance, if you're in an abusive situation and you simply want to get out of it, the lawyer's job is to tell you what you're entitled to. But if you're so scared or if you're so intimidated that you are prepared to do something that will get you more of a release from your spouse, the lawyer's job is to listen to that and to advise you properly whether or not you can be protected, even going after your rights.
So during that initial consult, you tell your story and you feel like, okay, I've got an understanding of what the law will provide for me. You get some sort of strategy from your lawyer. How do you know if the lawyer truly gets it? Like, I guess it's just, and maybe that's just a feeling, I don't know, but how do you know?
So I know Rose will probably have a brilliant answer to that, but I just wanted to kind of take us back just to kind of add some things to what Rose was indicating. In terms of when I was doing consultations before, now I don't do them as often, but many, many years ago, I used to say to people, when you're at this stage in your life, oftentimes people need to have some therapy, to have an opportunity to speak to someone, maybe a therapist or someone who can help to ground them. Because by the time when you're coming to your lawyer in a place where you are feeling vulnerable, feeling really, and Rose used the word scared, perhaps even terrified of the unknown, because there's a lot of unknowns when we're changing our lives in such a dramatic way. It's always nice to be able to have a conversation with someone who can help to ground you and bring you back to yourself, essentially, and to help you to get to a place where you can speak with clarity or remember things with clarity. I used to say to people, maybe it's important for you to bring someone with you so that you could, that person can take some notes, because I know that in every consult that I've ever done, people forget. Right, they forget what the lawyer has said to them, because they're in your brain is in fight or flight. When you're in that place and you can't actually, solidify information or really absorb it, it's really hard for you to remember sometimes what it is that the lawyer said or did. And so sometimes that can become very difficult for people. So I oftentimes will say to them, take notes or get someone to come and take notes for you, so that, after the fact, there's someone that can help you to process the information that's been given, because there's a lot of information that's given in that first consult. I also want to sort of help people to remember that it's okay to be vulnerable in a lawyer's office. Sometimes people are feeling a lot of embarrassment because of the experiences that they've had in the relationship, and they don't want to talk about it. We live in a culture where we try to sort of suppress things and not share very valuable information. So for example, if someone says to me in a consult, I'm afraid of my spouse, but they don't really give me any tangible reasons why that would be, then it's hard hard for me to advise as to what the next step will be. Maybe it's a restraining order. Maybe it's something a little more drastic than, I don't know that there's anything more drastic than a restraining order, but you know what I mean, right? Maybe leaving the area altogether because there's some real difficulties and some real fears that could potentially create a life-threatening moment, right? So I think that it's important that people remember that your lawyer is not supposed to judge you. I always have to remember to tell people that in a consult, right? I'm not here to judge you. We all make mistakes. We've all, and as Rose said, she's had a history where, she's been through divorce, so have I. And there are lots of things in my past life that now I can speak of very freely. But when it was happening and when I was going through that very difficult space, it wasn't as easy to speak about it, and to tell somebody about it meant that I was weak, right? This is how we think. We are trained to think that if we share very vulnerable information about ourselves, that we're somehow not whole anymore. We're weak, and we we really should know better, right? The reality is that we should all know better, but we still make mistakes, and it's okay. It's okay to make those mistakes. So when you're meeting with a lawyer, you really should feel that your lawyer is ultimately hearing you and not judging you. And I think when you're speaking to a lawyer who has that kind of experience, like the life experience that Rose and I have, and we have some new lawyers here in our firm, and even though they don't have separation life experience, they've had other life experiences, which Rose and I, we train our new lawyers along those ideas, right? We sort of help them to see how their own life experience would have also sort of somehow, not 100%, but have some inclination as to the pain and the struggles of someone else who's sitting in front of them may potentially have as well, right? Our firm was built on the idea of, Angela and I may have mentioned this, but a lot of my training comes from, from yoga and meditation and a really strong grounding in basically reconnection with oneself. And so we sort of bring that to our practice here at the firm. And those are the kinds of lawyers that you're looking for when you're in pain. And some people are not ready for that. And we get that. I get, like we have people who come in and they're not ready to acknowledge that pain, and they're still in that struggle. And that's okay too. Sometimes, we can get past that wall, and sometimes we can't. So I don't know if that answered your second question, but Rose, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Joanna. I was just sort of cut into the chase to the questions, and it's very good to address that emotional piece. One thing I want to point out to everyone is that whatever you tell the lawyer, that is confidential. Mm-hmm. So totally be open with your lawyer. And the way you know that the lawyer is actually listening to you is sometimes just from them asking for more information. Mm-hmm. If they just dismiss it or ignore what you've said and just start talking legalese, then they haven't really listened.
And I think, Joanna, what you said is really important, because it's a distinction between listening and judging. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are afraid to speak up because they have been judged in their relationship so hard that now they're leaving the relationship and they have trust issues to begin with anybody they're meeting. And if they get into a lawyer's office and they feel judged, it gives them this uncertain feeling, and they can't figure out what that is. Mm-hmm. It's like, I feel uncomfortable, but this is a lawyer who's in a position of power and knows better than me. So maybe I should just follow through on this, right? And hire this first person I've met without understanding why they feel uncomfortable, why they're not, feeling supported. And they don't maybe fully realize that the lawyer is their advocate. And I say this all the time, that's your partner. That my lawyer knew more about me than anybody else in this world. At around year 4 or 5 of our battle. She knew the color of my nail polish before I changed it, because I was too afraid to make a move without her. So having your lawyer be your advocate means that they're your partner and that you trust them wholeheartedly. And I think communication with your lawyer needs to be free and open and without fear. And so that can only happen if you feel they're listening and not judging. So I think that's a really important key factor. One thing, Rose, that sort of leads me into a question from one of the viewers. Are lawyers supposed to discuss with their clients conversations had with the other side and provide information you have discussed?
Okay, so when you retain a lawyer, they are representing your interests, and whatever is discussed on the file should be shared with the client. I make it a rule that if I send an email to the other lawyer, a copy of that is forwarded to my client so that they know exactly what's going on. If your lawyer isn't reporting to you on a regular basis, you chase that lawyer because you are owed that duty of being kept informed and understanding what's going on. For instance, if I have a presentation I've made to a lawyer in terms of a possibility of some settlement, I would have vetted that with my client beforehand to make sure she's on board or he's on board. Then I present it, and then I will report to my client exactly what happened in terms of they were okay with this, but they pushed back on this. This could be because XYZ, and here's what I think we should go back with. So yeah, definitely keeping you informed is the basis for how we maintain our client relationships. It's not our file, it's your case. Our client is the person we're serving.
Angela, can I clarify? Were you asking as well if the lawyer is allowed to share information that they've been discussing with their own client with the opposing side? Is that what, did I hear that or no?
Yeah, it sounds like
a little
yeah, sorry. It sounds like the question is if they have so that the verbatim, are lawyers supposed to discuss with their clients conversations had with the other side to provide information you have discussed?
Yes.
I think yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with what Rose is saying. One of the things that I'm finding a lot, because I get a chance to sort of connect and see what's going on in the courtroom, I'm finding that a lot of lawyers, especially the newer lawyers, what happens is that, the two lawyers will have a conversation and one lawyer will say to the other, my client is prepared to agree to this. Do you think your client will agree to that? And I will hear the other lawyer say, no, I'm not even taking that to my client at all. And lawyers have an obligation. We have an obligation. If offers are made, we have an obligation to bring it back to our clients and to help to process that information with our clients. And I know I use the word clients, but the people that we are representing, they have a right to know and understand what is really on the table for them. And some lawyers don't do it. And that I feel is, I don't feel that it's appropriate, and I'm not sure that the Law Society would think that it's appropriate as well, right? I mean, clients, people have a right to direct their lives, and to, we are not the gatekeepers, and we shouldn't be the gatekeepers to people's resolution and their opportunity to move on with their lives, right? We have a rule in our office: when a file opens, we want to make sure that we can get that person from point A to point B as quickly as possible in a way that they are feeling comfortable and that they are feeling that this is a resolution that's worthy of them. And in that space, the reason why we want to do this is we want people to get on with their lives, right? We know that when you're in litigation, there's a lot of parts of you is now on hold, and people, you may have dreams and wishes in your life that you haven't been able to follow through on because you are now in this that it's almost like you're kind of in in a locked room to try and move past a lot of issues, and then there's a whole part of your life that's being ignored, and that's really difficult for people, because now you're in limbo in a lot of areas of your life, and that's not healthy.
Yeah, and it's definitely overwhelming when you have small children too, because
Yes.
people often say to me, and I'm sure you guys hear this a lot too, I can't do this for the next 18 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how do you get out of that?
Yes.
And sometimes, in my case in particular, there was no getting out of it through mediation or settlement. It was litigation because we were dealing with somebody who was unreasonable. And so sometimes I was stuck in that, going, oh my gosh, I can't do this for 18 years. How am I going to move on?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Angela, if I could just sort of go back to your original question, and Joanna's comment that the lawyer is acting as gatekeeper. First of all, it's against code of conduct. Secondly, when you're selecting a lawyer, you have to be sure that that lawyer does not have any bias in a certain way. So that person, that lawyer who is acting as gatekeeper, is really moving forward his or her own agenda, instead of thinking of the client, in that I have a duty to tell my client this is what they were saying, and then informing them properly around whether it was reasonable or not reasonable. So selecting the lawyer is very important.
Yes.
The cheapest is not the worst, and the most expensive is not the best.
Agreed.
I know. Yeah.
Agreed. 100% agree with that. What was I going to ask you? Oh, yes. Your comment about bias. How do you know? How do you know if your lawyer is biased or not?
My answer to that is always trust your gut. If you're in a meeting with a lawyer and you're not feeling it, leave it, because you're not feeling it for a reason. And sometimes, when we are in difficult places, especially when we're going through a separation or a divorce, it's hard to remember to trust our gut or to trust ourselves, because we have spent a lot of years with someone who told us that we are not good enough, or in a society that tells us that we're not good enough, and so we forget that we have a lot of power there. In terms of bias, oftentimes, we say things that will sort of lend to exactly what we're thinking and feeling. And I know as lawyers, we have a duty to check our biases all the time. Some of us are not as good at it, and some of us forget. Right. And so I know as a lawyer, that's one of the things that I constantly ask whenever I'm feeling a little disconnect from my client. I will ask myself that question: what is it about this situation or this particular person that is not sitting well with me? And is it something that is it a bias that I have? Does it make sense because of my own history or not? And so, a wise lawyer will oftentimes be asking those questions of themselves. And I don't know that you would know, because you can ask a lawyer, so tell me, what are your biases? That doesn't necessarily mean that they even know, right? Sometimes we don't know what our biases are. And until it comes out, it's like, oh, wait a minute, who is that person, right? And but a good lawyer is one who is incredibly self-aware and is really sort of coming to those questions themselves consistently. And it's hard. I know it would be very hard from my perspective anyways. Maybe Rose has some magic, she has some magic tools on how you can figure that out. But Rose, any ideas?
Well, before you get to the point of going to that initial consultation, hopefully you would have done some research. So you could have gone to their website. You could have looked at the words they use. For instance, there may be a lawyer who says, we'll fight for you. Now, that's probably not going to be totally in your best interest, because that may mean they love to litigate, they love to be in court, and whether you could have settled it outside of court or not doesn't matter to them. They're going to fight. Okay. So in that way, you look at the words they use. You look at the articles they use. You talk to friends for referrals. Like for instance, Angela, you would have a lawyer that you would recommend, right? Because you had a good experience. You wouldn't recommend the other one because you had a bad experience with that one. So look at their articles, look at their website, look at what they're saying, the words. That is something you should do before you actually call for that initial consultation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I also wanted to add the word guarantee. Any lawyer that guarantees you anything, run. Because we can never guarantee anything. You know, we go into the courtroom, judges have their own perspective on things, and their perspectives change. Our perspectives change over time as we see what happens in the courtroom from time to time. So absolutely, you know, if someone says to you that I can guarantee you a win, or I can guarantee that this is what's going to happen, you know, there is no way that they can. And that will only frustrate you, and it will break that, it'll break your trust in them as you move forward. So you kind of, and then of course, as you're not trusting them anymore, then, you know, they start to act in certain ways that may make you even more uncomfortable. So there are certain words, and Rose is correct. You know, if you're looking at people's articles and how they think and how they move forward. Today, we got a call actually from someone who says, which lawyer in your office is the nastiest? And I thought, oh, well, that's a person we do not want to represent. And the reason for that is because we cannot always guarantee that nasty is the way to go, firstly. And secondly, the more unfriendly we are as counsel, the more money you spend. And the reason for that is because we are fueling the fire, we're fueling the litigation. And our job really is to try to help you to get to a place where resolution works for you. It's not to say that you're going to be a doormat at all. You know, sometimes it's interesting because we are a very resolution focused firm, and people will think, oh, you know, well, maybe they're doormats. We are not. We're not afraid to step into the courtroom. We're not afraid to challenge the other side, but we want to challenge for the right reasons, on the right grounds, and to help you to kind of move on with your life. You know, we're not going to fight tooth and nail over, you know, a piece of cutlery that maybe is only important because there is a need to keep the fight going. And that happens, right? Sometimes we are so we are so embroiled, we become identified with the fight that we tend to do whatever it takes to keep the fight going. And me as your lawyer, I have to be able to say that to you and say, you know what, Angela, I think you might be sort of getting off in the weeds here right now. And I need you to get on with your life. Is that piece of cutlery truly important to you? Is it something from Louis V's placemat or place setting, right? And if it is, then it's valuable, right? Then let's talk about what that really means and how we could ultimately get you the best value for that piece of cutlery. But if it's something that, you know, maybe you got as a wedding present, you know, there will be lots of other presents. There will be lots of other things for you to sort of, you know, put your own energy into and not have to worry about that, you know. So I have a duty to also do what's called a reality check, right? Is to say, hey, is this really what you need right now? Right. And so to be the meanest lawyer or to fight the most is not necessarily, I know people would sometimes call, not here, but, you know, they would say, well, my lawyer is a bulldog. Well, then you must have a lot of money, because that's what is required when lawyers are bulldogs, is a lot of money, because they will keep the fight going unnecessarily. I'm not saying that the fight shouldn't keep going. There are times when it is necessary to do that, as Angela is pointing out in her particular circumstance, right? She had no choice because the other side was very difficult. You need a lawyer who's going to stand their ground. You need a lawyer who's going to be ready to resolve, but at the same time, hold ground for you so that you're not giving away everything but the kitchen sink. And so it's really important to kind of have that relationship with your lawyer, I would think.
Yeah, and I think too, just to touch on that for a second, it's like, I think some people think I either have a bulldog or I have somebody who just wants to settle and collaborate and, do this mediation type stuff all day long until I give in. And actually there's a lot of lawyers that are in the middle of that, where they know when to settle, but they also know how to litigate well. And litigating doesn't mean you need a bulldog. It means you need somebody strategic, somebody who's prepared in the courtroom, somebody who understands the judges and understands what the court cares about, so that they're litigating the right things and they're approaching the litigation from a strategic mindset instead of a, let me just go in there and bark. So it's not that you need one or the other. You need somebody in the middle who understands both sides. In case you end up in a courtroom, you want to make sure this person knows how to run that courtroom or how to behave in that courtroom. And so, yeah, I can see that, but yeah, I hear that a lot. Maybe I just need to hire a bulldog because the other side is so intimidating, and that's not always the case.
No, a good lawyer is never intimidated by the other side, especially if you, as you're saying, Angela, you're prepared, you can read the room. There's that intuitive element that comes in. There's the self-awareness piece. I always say, when I'm in the courtroom, I need to know who my judges are. I need to know who my opposing side is. And if I know them well enough, I know how they think. I need to understand what's really important to my client. What is my person's bottom line? What are some of the struggles and the pains that he or she might be experiencing, especially to be able to monitor the environment. So if there are triggers in that space, and I need to be able to monitor that to ensure that my person is not triggered in any way that's going to get them derailed, right? Because I need my person to be really focused and to be ready for resolution and to feel comfortable in that space. And so there's a lot of factors that a very aware lawyer will be taking into account. For example, I would never leave my client alone and this is when we were actually in the courtroom a lot more. I wouldn't leave my client alone in the foyer with the opposing side and the opposing side's girlfriend, right? Like we just can't do that. You make sure your client is protected and has a feeling of self safety, and grounding. And so there are things as a lawyer, I think good lawyers are able to manage their client's environment as well, to allow them to feel a sense of security and the capacity and the ability to voice what's really happening for them. So, yeah.
I think one of the things that Joanna has pointed out very well in this presentation is that viewing your client as a person is so key. They're not just a client paying your bill. You are there looking after this person to get them through to the other side.
Yeah, I think that leads really well into the next question I wanted to ask you both. And you guys can decide who's better suited for this one. But when do we let the lawyer lead and when does the client sit back? You've said that the client is sort of the boss here, right? You guys are the advocates, but when does the client start to take a role? I know that you mentioned earlier that, if you're reaching out to your lawyer and they're not responding, then maybe you need to chase them a little bit and figure out if you're not getting communications, you should. So is that how it should be going? Like at what point? I guess I don't really know how to break this down into smaller parts. It's a very big question. But I think I guess just when do you know when it's the lawyer's job to take control here and when you need to sit back versus when you need to sort of manage the situation?
And I'm sure Rose will have, I think both Rose and I would have some ideas around this. Maybe Rose, what I'll do is I'll let you answer it and then I will sort of pop in because I don't know, because it depends on the situation, right? It depends on where you are. So if you're in the courtroom, the lawyer leads, right? If you are at the courthouse and not in the courtroom itself, again, the lawyer is managing the environment and the lawyer is leading that process. If you're talking about in terms of the file itself, let's say, for example, and I think you mentioned, if the lawyer's not moving things along, there are situations where lawyers are not moving things along, right? Because maybe they have a full file load and there are other things that have sort of come up that are fires that they're trying to put out in other matters. And the thing is that in the legal realm, the lawyer should always be leading, because the lawyer understands what the law is and what it is that they need to be doing at any given moment. When it comes to the part where, maybe your lawyer's not responding to you, and first of all, I don't think that there's any situation where a lawyer shouldn't respond to a client. It may be that they are, maybe it's 12 emails a day that the lawyer then can't respond to all of them, because that happens, right? And I know that when people are in a state of, anxiety, or there's a lot going on in their lives, you want answers right now. And sometimes the lawyers don't always have the answers to those questions right off the bat, right? It may be something that needs to be addressed in the courtroom, and the lawyer can certainly say to that person, listen, this is something we will address in the courtroom. When we go to court next time, we'll make sure that it's in the brief, so that, we're going to talk about it. And it's important for the lawyer to say that to you, right? To say, listen, these are things that I can actually manage and the things that I can't manage. And I'm usually very clear with people about that, right? It sounds like maybe you need to speak to a counselor or a therapist to help you to manage some of the emotions you're feeling around these particular issues. When it comes to sort of, like the briefs, the lawyer should be leading in terms of, okay, it's time to draft your brief. We need your information. The client may lead from the perspective of gathering all the information that the lawyer may need from them. That's always really important, because I know when I was preparing documentation, it's always hard to get people to get information to me. Like, I need you to tell me what this bank account has in it. I need you to tell me to send me the, whatever documents is relating to your house. But then, I've been asking for these documents over and over again, and I still don't have it, right? 3 months later. So those are some of the things that we need people to ultimately be gathering their own information. That's a great time to lead. An opportunity to lead in the courtroom is where you're sort of communicating with your lawyer. The reason why I would say that the lawyer leads in that area is because you don't want to say anything that's going to be incriminating. You don't want to, have outbursts that are then going to be used against you. And it's always, that's why your lawyer is there, is to protect you from those things, right? So that's a hard question. But I think, I think if the question is, should my lawyer be responding to me? Absolutely. Should my lawyer be very clear to me as to what they can and can't do? Absolutely. Should my lawyer tell me what's relevant and what's not relevant? Absolutely. Not that it's not relevant in your life. Everything is relevant in your life. The thing is that, and I'm a mediator, so I often with time will say to people, it's a good idea if you can mediate, because there's only a very small part of your life that the court will find relevant that they're going to make decisions on. And that's heartbreaking for families, because your life is not just a tiny little, block. Your life is so much more encompassing and complex. But the court only has the authority and the ability and the support to address a very small part of your life. And those are the things I think that where a lot of lawyers stumble, because they forget to communicate that information to their clients. And because maybe they don't know how, or maybe they don't want people to feel hurt by that, because it's the truth. Our system, I often say, justice exists in the hearts of people, not in a system. And so we need to start to figure out how we can treat each other better. And, you know, I'm certainly one of those people that would say to another lawyer, listen, your behavior is inflaming the situation. I'm going to need you to tone it down. And I've done that in a courtroom, in a courthouse, not necessarily in the courtroom, but I've been able to say to senior counsel sometimes, this is when I was much younger, is that your behavior is not helping this family. And if we're here to truly help this family to get from point A to point B, you're going to need to change your strategy, because that's not doing it. And I'm going to go into the courtroom and I'm going to share that with the court and let the court and help the court to understand exactly what's happening here. That's a lawyer who's really interested in resolution and interested in getting people through the process with the least amount of harm. And because this is a very harmful process. So sorry, Rose.
Oh, no. No, you're actually bang on. And the only thing I would add to that is to say, when a client feels that they need to lead, it means the lawyer is not doing his or her job.
Yes, yes.
It means that somehow, hey, you're not telling it the way it should. You're not representing me and what I'm looking for. And that's why I feel I need to step in and fill that gap of leadership. So when you go to a lawyer, you are trusting this person to represent you fully. And they have the legal knowledge, they have the strategies, and there should not really be a time when you feel you have to lead. I would say the relationship between the lawyer and the person being represented is one of cooperation towards a united goal.
Mhm.
And so there shouldn't be really this you lead, I lead, whatever. But the lawyer does have the know-how, does have the knowledge. And as long as they listen to the person they're representing and do their job properly, then there should not be a question of who leads now.
Mhm.
That's really important. You know, I think that even for me in my own situation, I never felt the need to lead. I felt like my lawyer was the leader. Like I said, I didn't change my nail polish without asking her which color she liked. Because I felt so strongly that she had it, you know, she had it handled, and she would be in communication with me. And I just trusted so deeply in her, that I never felt the need to lead. And naturally, I'm a leader in my home, in my work, in everything. I'm a quiet leader. So I like to take that position if I feel it needs to be taken. And I never felt that, because I had a good leader in my lawyer. So my next question for you is, you know, I trusted my gut as a client. And I've hired this lawyer because the initial consult went really well. I felt really good about it. And then all of a sudden, as soon as I signed on the dotted line, paid my retainer, everything went quiet. Nobody's responding to me. The lawyer's not responding. I don't know what's coming next. I thought we had a good plan. I thought we had a strategy. I haven't heard anything. They told me they'd have this done in 2 weeks, or an application to the court, or a letter out to the other side. That hasn't been done. What now? Now what?
It's time to hire a new lawyer.
Already. Already.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, is that going to look bad on someone? Because this is another question I get all the time. If this is my third lawyer, who will have me now? You know, is that going to look bad? Is a lawyer going to want to be the third or fourth on the file? And is this going to work against me in court? And somehow they'll spin it like I'm a problem. I can't keep a lawyer.
I don't think that I've ever heard that argument in a courtroom, that someone's, you know, is not doing their part because they can't maintain their lawyer. I mean, lawyers, people go from lawyer to lawyer for many different reasons. And, you know, there are times when people are not easily represented because for whatever reason. And, you know, as you were speaking, Angela, a thought came to mind is that sometimes we are biased. when we are retaining counsel, right? Because we have an idea, for example, that person who called today and said, I want a lawyer who is, I want the fighter lawyer, right? That is a bias. That is, you know, so if a lawyer, let's say, for example, we had said, yeah, sure, come on in for a consult. And, you know, we put someone in there and now we're starting to act, yeah, of course, we're going to fight for you. And, you know, everything's going to be fine. That's what you want to hear. You know, sometimes I say to people, I am the kind of lawyer that will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Because the difference between those two things can cost you a lot of money. You know, like you could, if I tell you what you want to hear, we could be in this for a long time, depending on what your own bias is, right? Am I wanting to win? Am I wanting to be the person that's going to come out on top in this? And I will tell you that in family court, no one ever comes out on top. Everyone suffers, including children in a big way, they suffer. And as a children's lawyer, I can tell you, I've seen it so many times. So yeah, I don't know that I've ever heard that argument. But if for some reason there are difficult clients, right? There are people who we are difficult sometimes. I know if I go to get my tire changed and I can be, there are moments when I might be a little difficult. I don't know. I'm never really the person to do that. But, you know, there are times when people rub us the wrong way and we are difficult. And it's okay as long as we are self-aware and we can come back and we can pay attention to that. Not everyone is. So there are situations where clients can be, but it doesn't sound like from this story that is being told that that is a difficult person. It just sounds like maybe the decision was made to hire this person because they said everything we wanted to hear, and now here we are, but that person is not necessarily authentic, right? So not everyone comes to the table in general in life, period. Not everyone comes to the table with authenticity, and sometimes it's hard to judge that. And so don't kick yourself for that. Just make a decision to do something different quickly.
So they can ask for their retainer back. Like, what's that conversation look like? People are really nervous about it. I've given you a ton of money.
Yeah.
Can I get it back?
Well, what you might hear from the lawyer is that, you know, I'm going to give you back a portion of it because some of it was used for whatever reason, right? There may be some legitimate charges on the account, perhaps. I don't know, and I can't really speak to it 100%, but absolutely, you can say, listen, you know what, I think at this point we need to part ways. I'd like for you to send me my final account and the remainder of my retainer, and I will be on my way. Thank you very much. I would also like to have my documents so that I can retain new counsel. So whatever documents you may have given to the lawyer. I always suggest that when people are going to their lawyers, and we do this a lot here, is we always give people back their original documents. You know, we'll make a photocopy and we'll have it so that you never have to ask for your file, right? Your file should always be with you. When your lawyer prepares briefs and you have a copy of it, keep it with you. So you never have to go back to your lawyer and say, I'd like to have a copy of your file, because you should have that, right? Everything, as Rose says, you know, every letter that goes out, every brief that's sent out, every document that comes in, our job is to send you a copy of that so that you have an opportunity to review it. Keep it, you know, create for yourself. And I know, Angela, this is one of the things that you do with your people, is create a, you know, a folder, a binder that you can refer to consistently, that you have your entire file with you.
Yeah, I did that with my own file before my documentation system existed. I had a whole system, I had the banker's boxes of paper I was handed, you know, that I had just signed, the affidavits and the notices of motion and all of that. I had the piles of paper locked away so the kids couldn't find it in banker's boxes. My lawyer jokes there's 25 of them, not joking. And I also had all of the letters that would go back and forth and all of the drafts of everything. She copied me on every single thing. So I have it all in my email, stored in folders, depending on what it is. So it's so important to keep everything, right? So that you don't have to ask for your file.
Yes. Yes.
Because it gets expensive when they have to pull that file out for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to address, Angela, was that your person who consulted with you said, he promised to get back to her within 2 weeks and didn't. The thing is, when you have met with a lawyer and they tell you this is what's going to happen next and this is what to expect, if they're promising you a time, then they should meet it. Or if they haven't met it or is having some difficulty because of whatever reason, they should actually get back to you and say, there's been a delay, but here's a new date. So the lawyer needs to manage the expectations of the person they're representing, as well as the person who is seeking that representation. It's your file, it's your life. So you should take charge of that and ask for what you pay for. Like you said, you would file an application by this date. You haven't done it. When will you do it? And if you can't do it, yes, I would like to terminate my retainer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's integrity, right? We do what we say we're going to do. And in the old days when Rose and I started practicing, that's what you did as a lawyer, and this is one of the things, Angela, we had this conversation before the session started, was that we are finding that a lot of lawyers, especially our newer lawyers, they don't quite appreciate those aspects of things, right? Here's where we part ways in terms of experience, right? Experience says from way back when, because Rose and I are coming from a really far time behind, like way back there.
It's not that far.
But where we must do what we say we're going to do, right? As officers of the court, because that's what we are as lawyers. We are held at a higher standard, right? And that standard is to perform as per our word. And so if I say that I'm going to file an application in 2 weeks and something comes up, my world blows up and there's lots going on, then my duty is to inform the person that I'm representing, say, listen, you know what, I'm really sorry, but we didn't actually get to your application on time. We're going to need another week or two. And so long as there are no issues it wouldn't prejudice the person in any way, right? Because that's another thing, right? As a lawyer, I have a duty to say, listen, if I file this in a month or two from now and it prejudices you, then I have to say to you, you probably should seek another lawyer, someone else who can actually perform for you in a timely way if it's going to prejudice you in some way. And when I say that, I mean, maybe somehow it affects your life in such a dramatic way, maybe financially or your children in some way, that could potentially be detrimental. My job is to say, seek a new lawyer who can actually do this for you in the time frame that's required. So, and some lawyers want to hold on to the file because, this is an opportunity to make money. But if you're coming from the old school like Rose and I, it's not just about money. We came into the practice of law to practice law and to help people. And not every lawyer came into the practice of law for that purpose, right? They came in because some people see it as an opportunity to earn a living, and that's the focus. It was never our focus. Way back when we were coming into the profession, we came into the profession because precisely we were called to, right? This is a calling. Becoming a lawyer is not something one should choose lightly. Honestly speaking, is one of the things, like when people, high school students in particular, they say, I want to be a lawyer. Really? Do you? Right? This is a calling. It should not be taken lightly. Maybe that's the first question you ask your lawyer in a meeting, right? Was this a calling for you? What caused you to become a lawyer? Why did you choose this profession? Because, if they say to you, well, it was the thing, I just decided to apply to law school and I got in, then that's a problem, right? I'm called to do this job. So there you go. Sorry, Rose. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
So we are at time now. So I want to get to just one quick question. I think that is the only one left. There's another one I want to get to, but that might be another webinar.
We're happy to come back.
Thank you. Can I respond to an attorney letter if I am pro se? Now, pro se is a US term meaning, maybe you guys know this. Do I need to explain that?
Representing yourself.
Yeah, exactly. We have some US folks here today. So can I respond to an attorney letter if I am pro se, if I'm representing myself?
Absolutely.
So can they have, if you're representing yourself, can you have phone conversations with the other attorney? How does that work?
I'll let you go. Oh, you want me to? Oh, sure.
Okay.
Well, I think I've said a lot, so I'll hand it over to you, Rose, and I'll add anything if I need to.
Okay. So the thing is not whether you can respond or communicate directly with them. The question is how the lawyer would respond, in that lawyers are a little bit sometimes paranoid, in that they're afraid to talk to self-rep people because there's no record of it, so to speak. And the other person who is self-represented may say, well, I spoke to that lawyer and this is what he said. So for myself, when there's a self-rep person on the other side, I say, will you please communicate with me in writing, whether it be email or a letter, as the case may be. But in terms of advancing with your own case, you have every right to communicate and communicate fully. It's just that you may be restricted in how you do it, in that the lawyer may insist that it be done in writing as opposed to verbally.
And the restrictions are really more for the lawyers, in the sense that the other restrictions that the restrictions that Rose is talking about, absolutely, but the other restriction would be that lawyers are not supposed to communicate with a party if that party is represented by another lawyer. And so lawyers are a little skittish about that, right? They're not sure, and so they have to be very careful, and they have to confirm that you are self-represented. The other thing the lawyers are very concerned about when they're communicating with self-represented people is that maybe that person could potentially say that they've said things that they haven't said, because lawyers have we're supposed to be, I'm not saying that we all are, but we have a code of conduct that we have to follow. As officers of the court, there's certain things that we're supposed to adhere to, right? That integrity, that element of holding up the law and ensuring that we are acting always from a place of legal duty. And so we have a duty to the court, we have a duty to the legal profession. So there's the assumption that because we have that, that it's possible that anyone else who don't have those rules and obligations may potentially breach that. And so as a lawyer, we could find ourselves into some kind of dilemma. And I think that that's where the issue comes, when lawyers are a little skittish about communicating with self-represented people, which is why they would ask, as Rose pointed out, for you to communicate with them in writing, so that there's a record of everything that's being said and that's being done at any given time. But there is an obligation. If you're self-represented, you're taking on the task of moving your matter forward. So you should be communicating. Just communicate effectively. I would always say be very cognizant of how you're doing it, what you're saying. Pretend that you're someone else. You're not you. So don't be swearing at the lawyer or saying things that's going to be self-incriminating, right? You want to pretend that you're not the person, you're representing this person, and here I am coming to the table as if I'm not myself, right? In a sense, you're taking on an alter ego, essentially, is what I'm saying. But it's important that you are very cautious and very cognizant of what you say and do, because it is information that could then potentially be used against you.
Yeah, I always say, like, professional. Just be professional when you're dealing with your ex, when you're dealing with the other lawyer. Just really put yourself in an emotionless state, like you're talking to your boss or a colleague at work. And some people talk really badly to their colleagues at work, so that analogy doesn't work. So
Neutrality is what I like to say. Just be neutral, as much
Yeah.
as neutral as you can be, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so I know we're over time. We are going to send this recording out to everybody here. So if you have to leave, don't feel like you're going to miss anything. I will email this out to you. But I do want to ask you guys to talk about your transformative parenting plan, program.
Mm.
I'll get it right
Mhm.
one day.
That's okay. It's actually now called the Awakened Parenting Program, and we've had to not use the word transformative because in creating a business, when I say that, I mean creating an incorporation for the program itself. We had to use a word that was not being used elsewhere. So because it was being used elsewhere, we came up with an Awakened Parenting.
I
So
like
yeah,
it. I like it. It feels good. Yeah. So
yeah.
explain to everybody sort of what the purpose of it is, how they can sign up for it, and how it's useful for them.
For sure. Angela, what I can do is maybe I can send you the link and you can send it out to people if they wanted to register for the program. We do have a session starting in January, so if people are interested, the purpose of the program is really to teach parents. First of all, the program starts out by giving parents a sense of where children are at in conflict and in a separation scenario. So we help parents to get into the mindset of what's happening for children throughout that process. We try to get parents back to why it is that they started this whole, not the court process, but the process of children and bringing their kids into the world. We talk to them about things like what kinds of tools that they might be using. So we teach a portion of the course where we talk about negotiation skills. So we teach negotiation skills, how to communicate more effectively, how to self-care, because this is one of the things that sometimes we forget. And even though parents really know how to self-care, more often than not, we forget when it comes to our own ourselves. So the program itself is it's a group session, so parents will attend with other parents. It could be their co-parent as well, and we go through a lot of different sections of the program. And so one section, and I just have it up here, is looking at the child's point of view, helping parents to get a sense of their own personal awareness, their mindset, which is something I know that you teach as well, Angela. Communication, how to truly hear the other side and to be heard, because it's in that listening and that hearing is how we can now diffuse conflict and get us to a place of resolution in a much quicker way. How to set boundaries and how to become self-empowered in the process. You gave an example of being yelled in a parking lot, right? How do you create the boundaries in that moment, and how do you become self-empowered after something so dramatic and so intense happens in your world? And then of course, how to create a partnership, and we look at it from a business perspective, in terms of how would you run a business and co-parent or co-partner with someone in that particular context. So those are ideas of how we go through it. It's a weekly session. It's for 2 hours. Sometimes we go beyond because people are just engaged in the program. And there's 7 sessions, so 7 weeks. It's actually 8 weeks, because the orientation is the 8th. And at the end, people get a certificate, and there's a lot of resources there. I'm an accredited mediator, so I offer mediation. I think it's 2 free hours of free mediation time to parents who decide that they want to go through mediation with me, or with any mediator that I am supervising. So there's a lot of resources. We talk a lot about books. I'm a sort of a student of many different personal growth teachers and gurus, Rose included. So I'm one of Rose's students as well. And so I bring a lot of the information to the parenting program. And it started because one of our judges was basically throwing her hands up and saying, and rightfully so, saying, I don't know what to do with these parents in the courtroom. They're forgetting that they're kids behind all of this. Joanna, what can we do. And because I was a children's lawyer, I was then sort of given the task of figuring out what can we do in the community to bring parents back to truly who they are, and to remind them of their needs of their children, and remind them of their own needs, right? Their own needs to get to the end of this. And so this particular judge was very happy when we created this program. And so from time to time, we will have parents who are going through the system, through the court process, come to the course because judges have sent them to us, and really felt that it was useful for parents to see and hear what was being taught in the program. Because, and what we hear from parents all the time when they go through the program is that, why don't they teach this stuff in school? You know, if I'd known this beforehand, I never would have gone through the court process. If, you know, I wish that I was sort of more grounded in myself. This has taught me a lot for my future relationships. So it's really valuable. It's more personal growth work. And I've actually heard parents say that this is not just a parenting course, this is a personal growth course. And Rose has had the pleasure of teaching many of those sessions. And so she brings her unique self to it, and her coaching materials and who she is to the process. And we do have a counselor as well facilitating, but I always find that the counselor and the lawyer together really makes a good combination, because we know what happens in the courtroom, the counselor knows what's happening in the heart and in, you know, the body and the mind. And so it's really helpful to have those two different perspectives. I don't know if I've said enough about it, but I'm more than happy to send you the link, and then you can kind of send it off to your people. And we do it by Zoom, so we can do it across I feel across the world. We could have people coming in from anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's a great resource, you know, not only for the parents that are being ordered to do it, because a judge decided this was something they should be doing instead of arguing in a courtroom, but also for yourself, you know, no matter what the other parent is doing, for your own sort of growth and mindset work, this is a great opportunity to sort of build some framework about who you want to be and what you want to focus on in your life as you go through this, because so many people are stuck and they don't have these resources and they don't know where to start or who to trust or what to believe. And so I think it's a great thing. And I'll email it out to everybody here along with the Zoom link from today, so that you guys can check it out as well.
And the other thing I should say is that we are so committed because we want parents to be better than they were yesterday. I want to be better than I was yesterday. And so because the materials are constantly changing, we offer parents the opportunity to come back once they've come to the program once. They can come back to the program as often as they wish, so long as we're running a session for 1 year at no cost to them. So they get to come back over and over again. We've had one parent who come back 4 times, and she says, every time I come back, I learn something new. And every time I come back, I feel invigorated and empowered and ready for the day, you know, and ready for what's going to be next. And so we really want parents to go beyond where they are right now, because, you know, this is a story I always tell. When I'm 105 years old, I need those kids to be sound and grounded to help me cross the street. So I'm performing a service that serves me at the end of the day, right? So I'm not doing this without an agenda. You know, we need a society that is more grounded.
I like that agenda though. It makes sense. It makes sense to me. I think about that too all the time. I'm like, all I care about is your kids. I want to make sure they're okay, you know, like we got to work on you so that you're in your best form so that you can help your kids in the best way possible, because they're going to be taking care of us, you know. We don't want conflict and toxicity sort of brewing into teenage and adulthood left unchecked. And, you know, if you can prevent further conflict and further, you know, problems for your child now, then you can do that. And it starts with you, you know. So
yes. Yeah, we are all leaders. Parents are leaders, and we're leading the next generation. So let's do it well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, ladies. This has been informative for me. I hope it was informative for everyone else. Like I said, will be sending this out to everybody because there was a lot of information in here, and I think people may want to rewatch it and and get some of those tidbits all over again. So I look forward to holding another one of these with you in the future if you're on board with that. And I will send out notices to everybody when we've got more information on that.
That's perfect. Thank you so
Right.
much, Angela. And thank
Thank
you
you.
everyone for being here.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you guys. Have a good night.
bye.
Bye-bye.